it might be easier to see. Good morning. I'm Natalie with the Iowa Donor Network, just here to do your annual education, so I'm sure you've seen me in the last couple of years. Our slides have changed just a little bit, just updated, and we have some a little bit new updates to share with you, and I'll kind of point that out as we get to it. These are the learning objectives we'll be covering. So from summarizing the hospital's regulatory responsibility related to donation, identify how and when to make a referral call to Iowa Donor Network, referral eligibility criteria, the difference between brain death and circulatory death in an organ donation situation, and then the importance of using discretion sensitivity when we're talking with our families who have just gone through the loss of their loved one. We are working together to transform lives through organ and tissue donation. Obviously, that's what inspires us to do the work that we do every day. In order for donation to happen, we all have to work together to make that happen. And through that, all are inspired to donate life. We are a not-for-profit organ procurement organization and a tissue recovery agency. We are regulated by Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, so CMS, just like you guys are. So a lot of the regulations that come up with donation and the regulatory responsibilities that fall in the hospital is brought to us by CMS. So just like the regulatory responsibilities here at the hospital, CMS has the same mandations for us at Iowa Donor Network. So we just kind of share that down to you guys. We're also regulated by the FDA. So when we go over questionnaires with our families, when we talk to them about tissue and organ donation, the questionnaire that we go over with them is regulated and come up with, and all those questions are done through the FDA. We have offices in North Liberty and Altoona. I'm based out of North Liberty. We've got a communication center that operates 24/7, 365. So anytime you guys are making that referral call, there's always going to be someone to answer that phone call. That is located, like I said, in Altoona. We got dedicated tissue recovery suite locations. So I don't know if many of you are familiar, but up until about 8 years ago, we used to come to the hospital to do all recoveries. And obviously, as you know, if we try and spread all of our staff throughout the state to fulfill 1,000 tissue donors a year, it was not happening. We were having to tell a lot of families no. Because we were having to go to Sioux City, Mason City, Keokuk, you name it, we're traveling all over the state. So we built our own recovery suites. So now all the tissue donors come to us. We come pick them up here at the hospital. We transport them to us. Organ donation is obviously different. It has to happen in a hospital. But tissue donation, someone passed away, you make that referral call. If they're a tissue donor, we come pick them up and bring us to us. That's why we're able to now fulfill over 1,000 tissue donors a year. And we don't have to tell anybody no that's suitable for donation. We also partner with the Iowa Lions Eye Bank. So we are not the Iowa Lions Eye Bank, but because we obviously share a very similar mission, we partner with them. That way you guys don't have to make 2 referral calls. When you call us, we automatically screen for the eye bank. Now, in a situation where it becomes where we cannot fulfill tissue donation, but they still can go through with eye donation, then they're going to contact you for further questions or whatever they need. But in a situation where they're able to do tissue and eyes, you will not hear back from the eye bank. We will take care of that, and we will take care of all the communication in between that. The First Person Consent, or the Uniform Anatomical Act, or GIFT Act of 1968, legalized the transplantation of human organs and tissues. And what this also did is protect our registered donors. So any of you out there that's a registered donor, something happens to you, you pass away, your next of kin cannot come back and say, nope, I don't want them to be a donor. You gave your legal consent prior to your death, and us as hospitals and organ procurement organization have to carry out that wish. So that's what protects us and what also legalizes the process of transplantation and donation. So how do you register? We had a lot of questions because up until 5 years ago when you went to the DMV, they said, well, you have to go online in order for it to be on the state registry. They've been able to streamline that process where when you go into the DMV, they're automatically going to put it on the state registry now. So you only need to register one of those places. However, I highly recommend you have it on your driver's license for many reasons. One, your family can see what your registry status is. You'd be surprised, over 70% of our families we talk to have no idea what their loved ones' wishes are. I'm sure you see that on a day-to-day basis in what you do. People just don't talk about it. It's not something they really share. It's not something they think to talk about. Another main reason is for out-of-hospital professionals. So if something happens to you in a car accident, you pass away outside of the hospital, you're not transported to a hospital where they're mandated to make that phone call, it might alert our EMS agency to look at that and say, oh, they're a registered donor, what do I need to do to make sure that they fulfill those wishes? Out of hospital agencies, so anything outside the hospital, nursing home, hospice, EMS, fire, law enforcement, medical examiners, they are not required to make a phone call to Iowa Donor Network for a death. And in order for the donation process to begin, we have to be notified. So I'm a registered donor, I die in a car accident outside the hospital, my death doesn't get called in, I don't get to be a donor. So automatically, that law enforcement agency or that EMS agency now made the decision for my family for me not to become a donor, even though that was my wish. Are they doing it on purpose? No, not always, because they don't always know, but it's really important that you have that on there because it might trigger that phone call. So when a person makes a donor designation, like I had said, it is legally binding. Legal next of kin cannot change that decision post-mortem. If a patient's not registered, then the decision becomes up to the next of kin, whether they want them to donate or not. So you don't have to be registered to be a donor, but when you are registered, that's legally binding, and we do have to fulfill those wishes. If you're under the age of 18 or you have a child under the age of 18, it's the next of kin's or parent's decision then at that point. They could be a registered donor, but since they're under the age of 18, then the parent can make the decision either way. So just so you guys are aware of that. And like I said, legally and ethically, it is the responsibility of the hospitals and recovery organizations to carry out those decisions. A little bit about registration. So we actually are now up to 70% of Iowans are registered organ, eye, and tissue donors, which is pretty incredible. So you may see that a high number of your patients, or you may get a lot of patients that are registered donors over the years, because we just see that number keep increasing. 95% of Americans, through research, say they support donation, but for some reason we only have 54% of our overall United States population that are registered donors. So this is why we offer each and every person opportunity for donation. We don't just call registered donors families. We call families whether they're registered or not, because such a great percentage of our population does support donation. And you would be surprised, when I do all my hospital reports annually at the beginning of every year for the previous year, a lot of my hospitals, their overall donors, the not registered donors that become donors outweigh those that were registered. Because maybe those registered donors weren't suitable for donation, that sort of thing. So we do have a very high percentage of non-registered donors that go on to be donors. So we offer that opportunity to every single person, not just the registered donors.
How does Iowa rank with other states? I mean, is 69% of...
We're one of the higher states. Yep. So obviously we're a smaller state, right? So there's less of us. But we are one of, I can't tell you where, but we're probably in the top 10 of the states that are registered donors. So we have a very high percentage, which is great. And some counties are higher than others. So when I say you may have a high percentage, I don't know what this exact county is, but there are counties that are lower percentage. But I think maybe our lowest county might be like 49 or 50% of their total counties registered, which is still, that's half of the population. Yeah. So that kind of takes into consideration. A little bit about CMS, or regulatory responsibility. CMS does regulate that every single death at the hospital is called in, whether that's an emergency room death, whether that's inpatient, whether that's an OR. Wherever that death would be considered a death on your death record review annually, that has to be called in. And we do reports every year to make sure that every single death is called into Iowa Donor Network. It also regulates and mandates that all families of potential donors, whether registered or not, be given the opportunity for donation. So this is why we call every family that becomes suitable for donation. That is a CMS regulation. The individual that offers the donation opportunity, so the ones that talk to those families and call those families, must be a designated requester who has completed that training on how to approach families. So that would be an Iowa Donor Network employee. It's a very hard conversation, or can be, depending upon the situation. So we don't expect you to know the information. We don't expect you to approach those families. Your regulatory responsibility is just making sure you're calling in that death to us. We will take it from there. Let us contact the family. Let us do the hard conversation, because we have people that are trained to do that. I don't do that job for a reason. We have great individuals that are able to speak with those families, have had great training. So we just ask that you call us, and then we will take it from there. And just as always, use discretion, sensitivity with respect to the circumstances, views, and beliefs of the family. So We're not bringing up donation. We're not talking them in and out of donation. We're just there to support them. Make that phone call to us and we will do the rest.
So we call for everybody, just
Yep.
because that's what we do anyway.
Yep.
But then they say there are suitable for donation. You don't want us to say anything to the family at that time. What if they're
Nope.
expecting or waiting for the funeral home to come pick them up? Or, because we've had people that have to stay for several hours with
Right.
ice, and that's maybe not what the family's expecting. How soon are they gonna get a phone?
They get a phone call within an hour after you call us, the family does.
Okay.
So they get a phone call very quickly, so they know. So typically you call, that's why it's better to call us right away. So the death happens and call us within, we like to say within an hour, but the sooner you call us, the sooner we can get a hold of the funeral home and the sooner we can get a hold of the family. So the minute you call us within an hour of that phone call, we are trying to contact the family.
Okay.
Now, do they always answer? No. If they ask, if they bring it up, you can say, we have contacted Iowa Donor Network for the possibility of donation, but I wouldn't bring it any farther than that. If they don't bring it up, it doesn't need to be talked about because that just brings up more questions and whether, you don't know the answer and you may, and I know as a nurse or as a care provider, you want to be able to provide those answers. And sometimes we try and provide those answers and we not purposely give the wrong answer or say the wrong thing. And then, we could talk to them and say, well, they told me that my father could donate his heart. Well, maybe that's not what you said, but that's what they're hearing or that's what they're thinking when they think about donation. Because most people don't think about tissue, they think about organs, which I get. So yeah, call us. The sooner you call us, the better. Then we contact them within an hour. We are no longer having you bring families up to the nurses station. That was a really awkward kind of hard thing to ask the nurses to do. We're no longer doing that. Our new practice is you call us, we will contact them within an hour. Now, unless they don't have a phone call or they want to talk to us up at the nurses station, that might be a little bit different. But we try and get the phone number for me right away, so it's important that you have that next of kin information for us too on that phone call. We will contact them within an hour. So they should have a phone call or, at least a phone call and a generic voice message on their phone if they don't answer. So, good question. We are HIPAA exempt. So you call in the phone call to us. We're asking you a lot of verbal questions about the patient. You should and are able to share all that information with us for the purposes of donation and transplantation. There's no HIPAA violation with that whatsoever. So don't ever be feared that you're answering questions you're not supposed to answer, that you're doing something. We are HIPAA exempt for those purposes. And then we're going to ask you to fax the chart over. Do we have access to your medical records electronically, or are you still faxing? Anyone?
They have access.
Electronic, okay. So we're still going to ask you questions because the more we get from you on that first phone call, the better we're able to tell you, yes, they're suitable, no, they're not. Now, not always. Sometimes we still have to go back in that chart and review a bunch of things, and maybe something later in the chart we'll find they're not suitable. So the more you give us on that initial phone call, the faster kind of that process could be, because we're able to start kind of doing, yes, okay, there's a greater possibility of donation, or no, this is what's kind of trending, and this is why. So a little bit about hospital policy. At every single hospital, the hospital policy has a piece about organ and tissue donation, and it's a step-by-step process. It's a very, very good policy. It's laid out very clear, so if you ever have any questions, it's a good thing to go back and refer to. If you have some questions, or maybe something's different in there from maybe what I told you, don't be afraid to contact me, but just be familiar with that because it's a really good resource if you need something quickly to pull up. The first priority of the medical professional is to assess and treat the patient. You guys are well aware of that. I am sharing that because a lot of reasons why either kids don't register right off the bat or a lot of people are not registered is because there's a fear, or there once was a fear, or there's shows out there that say, if we see yes on your driver's license, we're going to let you die and take your organs. It's sad, but for any of you that watch those medical shows out there, that does happen. And I've seen it happen over the last couple of years in many shows, and I get really angry about it because the pieces about donation are never correct in those shows, and there's a lot of things on top of nursing care and physician care that also put our physicians and nurses to be bad people out there. So we can't always believe that, but unfortunately, a lot of people, that's where they get their facts. So that's okay. Just know that obviously we know that this is what you guys do, but make sure that you're, ensuring other people out in the community, whether it's your kids or your grandparents or parents, whoever it is, that obviously this is the first priority. So when to make a referral call to Iowa Donor Network. Here at Franklin General Hospital, every phone call you make is going to be after circulatory death. So death has been pronounced, and we're calling in that death for the possibility of tissue donation. However, there's multiple hospitals in the state of Iowa that can make imminent death referrals and after circulatory death. Obviously, imminent death meaning prior to death. So they come in, they're ventilated, but their prognosis is very, very poor. They know then at that point that they need to make a referral call. And that referral call for imminent death doesn't necessarily mean that patient isn't going to survive, but what we're seeing is the likelihood that they not survive. Have we gotten calls before where that patient has been treated and survived? We have. But at least we got that phone call so we can then closely watch that patient. Would we ever approach a family right from the start? No. We don't ever approach a family for organ donation until the family has been told that their loved one is not going to survive. Then we'd come into the picture. But at least we got that phone call up front so that we can monitor moving forward. So I will go over a little bit about organ donation at high level. You guys won't see it here, but you may have someone come in, you stabilize them, and you send them out. Then what happens? You send them out, you may never hear what the result is or what the process is, but you can kind of see from a high level kind of what that process is. So with an imminent death situation, this person can either obviously be treated for survival, which then organ or tissue donation would not occur. But in a situation where the outcome is different, it's a poor prognosis, they can either progress to brain death or we can go through organ donation by circulatory death. And in this situation, obviously, they have to be in a hospital on ventilated care in order for this to happen. So if someone passes away outside of the hospital, organ donation would not be a possibility. It would just be tissue at that point. But if someone gets in a car accident, they're intubated, they're sent to higher level care and they're treated, that's where organ and tissue donation can become a possibility. Now, everyone that gets intubated and sent to the hospital necessarily doesn't become suitable for organ donation, but it's still a possibility. So, two different ways in which organ donation can occur. So you have someone with a traumatic brain injury. They've been given a poor prognosis by their physician. In one situation, the physicians can tell, okay, this person is definitely progressing to brain death. They're going that way, so we are going to do brain death testing, okay? So then the doctors will put them through a series of brain death testings. Here in the state of Iowa, it's 2 physicians at 2 different times licensed, no medical students, no residents. We'll put them through brain death testing, and there's multiple tests they do. These are some of the examples of the tests they do for brain death. If they're able to declare brain death, the second physician to declare brain death, that's legal time of death on their death certificate, and we move forward with donation after that. Now, we have to place organs and find surgeons to come in and get those organs, find the recipients. So once brain death has occurred and they're suitable for donation, the family would complete the paperwork, and it's typically about 48 hours then after that point that we bring them down the OR to recover organs. Because of the process, if you think about it, if we have 8 organs to place, we're working with 8 different recipients, 8 different surgeons, 8 different hospitals, and some of them are flying in from all of the United States. So it can take a little bit. And from the time the family signs the paperwork saying, yes, I want donation, we take on all expenses from that point moving forward. Now, if they were in a hospital a week prior to that, then paperwork was signed, family's responsible for the medical bills up until that point. But from the time the donation paperwork is signed, moving forward, we take care of the expenses. Now, another way in which organ donation can happen is what we call after circulatory death. So these would be for those individuals that still are given a poor prognosis. Their chances of survival are 0 to none. The family knows this. The family at this time says, I don't want my loved one living this way. We're going to extubate, end of life cares. This is where we can come in and still offer organ donation. So we bring them down the OR. The difference between the two would obviously once we stop life support on a brain death situation, their heart's going to stop right away, right? Because they're brain dead. With circulatory death, their heart may not stop right away. But if their heart does expire or they expire within 60 to 90 minutes after extubation, then we can recover organs moving forward. There's a lot of tests they can do up front that will tell if that heart will stop. Now, not always is that completely accurate, but in a situation, if they don't expire, we'll move them back up their room with their family where they can pass away up there. But that's the difference between the 2 organ donation situations. what organs can be donated. So as you can see, there's 6 organs up there, but lungs usually go into 2 people and kidneys usually go into 2 people. So that would be 8 total organs. So they all have different viability stages, meaning that location is huge when someone's on a wait list. Heart and lungs, we only have 4 to 6 hours to get out of the patient and into the recipient waiting. So they're going to be pretty local. Where kidneys, we have up to 48 hours. So some organs we have a little bit longer than others. So just to show you how rare organ donation is, or the opportunity for it, 1 in 100 deaths will occur in a result where someone may be looked at for organ donation. So out of every 100 people that die, only 1 person is in a situation where we can at least look at the possibility of organ donation. And just because that 1 person's looked at doesn't mean even they're suitable. But that just shows that organ donation is very, very rare. So in a situation where a family can be an organ donor, it's a horrible situation to be in, but it's the only opportunity that they're able to make that decision themselves, where everything else has gone wrong. They're able to, this is the one thing they're able to say yes or no to. And when we talk to most of our families, they will say, we're so glad we were able to do this. It was our little bright light in something so tragic. We were able to help somebody else through that. 22 people die each day while waiting for a life-saving transplant. So when we talk about the transplant side of things, how scary that is for those people waiting. So again, when you take that 1 in 100 statistic, those people waiting already know that, okay, out of every 100 deaths, there's only 1 person that's even there's a possibility that they're able to be an organ donor, and is that person saying yes? And then out of that, how many people are just saying no in general? So they know that their chances are very rare of getting a transplant. And every 10 minutes, there's another name added to that wait list. So our wait list just keeps growing and growing. It really doesn't decrease. And why doesn't it decrease? Because we only perform about 37,000 transplants every year. So you take, I'll show you right now, 114,500 people waiting across the United States for an organ, and we only see 37,000 transplants every year. So we don't even begin to reach the amount of people waiting. I get a lot of questions, well, what about living donation? Living donation is great if you're a perfect match, the person you want to donate to. So I'll use my uncle, for instance. He's waiting for a kidney and pancreas. No one in his family that can donate is a match. So he has no choice but to wait for a deceased donor. And there's no one out there. He's been waiting for 5 years. He is 45 and he looks like he's 80. He has 2 girls in college. So he doesn't know. He doesn't know if he'll get his transplant or not. So living donation is great if you find a match, you have a match to be able to donate. But it's actually more rare than what people think with living donation. So I'll let you read Freddies' story. So as Freddie says, he actually is the recipient of 2 transplants. So he received a new heart and then later on received a kidney. So it can be pretty common for someone to receive 1 transplant and need another later. Because the longer we wait for an organ, the chances of another organ shutting down at the same time. So if someone's able to get an organ right away, typically we don't see another organ shutting down, but sometimes our anti-rejection medications can cause another organ to shut down. Or a baby receives a new heart. Typically they're going to need a new heart within 18 to 20 years later. You usually don't if you're a baby and you receive a heart, you're going to need a second and possibly a 3rd transplant throughout your lifetime because the hearts just don't last as long. Not saying they don't always, every situation's different, but typically it's what you're going to see. But he got his new heart obviously from a deceased donor, and I believe his kidney was through living donation. But it just goes to show his story. He got his transplant actually up in Rochester at Mayo, but lives here in Iowa, and he's a wonderful man. But he will tell you that the hardest part of all this was knowing that his new heart had to come from somebody who lost a family member. And they grieve very much the same way our donor families do. Not in the same way, because they didn't lose a loved one, but they live with a sense of guilt most of their life. And that's why a lot of our recipients do not want to meet their donor families. Not because they're being selfish, but because they don't know what to say. They don't know how to say thank you. They don't want to be put in that situation. So we like to share those stories because it's a great gift, but people also don't realize their struggles as well through that. Yeah.
Like if he got a heart transplant, do they ever do, you know, that person who died, would a kidney also be a match, perfect match for him?
Like, would he
They
do the
ever-
heart and kidney at the
do
same
they
time?
ever do 2 organ transplants at once?
They do, usually not like a heart and something else, because like his kidney failed later on after the heart transplant. But it's pretty common for a kidney and pancreas to fail at the same time, because usually it's kidney pancreas failure is usually due to uncontrolled diabetes. Is usually that's what my uncle's is, I should say. And not that it's necessarily, not everybody's is uncontrolled. My uncle just didn't take very good care of himself. Now he's realizing I probably should have, sort of thing. I mean, he is, but they took him. It's the hard thing with a kidney and pancreas is it's really hard. It's very rare to do a kidney and pancreas transplant at the same time. Why, I'm not sure. I think it's the surgery side of things, the recovery side of things. They have done it, but it's a pretty rare process. So we don't see a lot of a double transplant at the same exact time. Not that it doesn't happen, but now we've seen like a double lung recipient, so a full lung could go into somebody, which would be considered a double organ transplant, but typically not 2 organs at one time.
Yeah, because you said something about if you have 2 hearts or 2 lungs and 2 kidneys, that you save 8 people.
So we have 6 total organs that can be donated, but kidneys always get put into 2 different people, and lungs usually get put into 2 different people. So usually a left lung goes into somebody, a right lung. Kidneys, anybody that needs a kidney transplant, even though usually it's both kidneys are failing, they only take 1 kidney because we only need to survive with 1 kidney. There's no point in wasting 2 kidneys into 1 person. So and actually with a kidney, they don't ever take the failed kidney out. That failed kidney stays inside and they put the new kidney on top of it. Interesting, huh? Yeah. Yep, so they keep I don't know how they do it. I mean, because I'm like, don't they worry about it dying out? And, you know, but it's something with the kidney. They never, every other organ they obviously take out and replace. With the kidney, they just unhook it and rehook it and leave the other kidneys inside, and they just eventually just shrink up and go away. So yeah, when someone needs, like my uncle's, both of his kidneys are failing, but when he gets a kidney, he'll only get 1 because we only need 1 kidney. My grandma was only actually born with 1 kidney and never had issues. So it's pretty, I never knew that until I started working here. I'm like, it's crazy the process.
I have a question going
yeah.
back to what you were talking about, the guilt. Does the Iowa Donor Network then offer any type of support group?
We don't, so with donors, we offer a lot of resources and stuff to our donor families, and we have a lot of events and kind of groups that we have a department within our organization that strictly deals just with the families day to day.
So the recipients.
But the recipients, they would work with their transplant centers. So we provide the recipients with the organs, but they work with their own transplant centers. Yep, so whether it's the University of Iowa or one of the Des Moines hospitals or Mayo. Not saying if they called us, we couldn't provide them with information about support groups, but we solely work with our donor families. Yep, but we have volunteers that were recipients that come and volunteer for us. So we kind of work with them, but they would work more with their transplant centers. Yep, very good question.
I have a question on the intestine.
Yeah.
It only gets to 1 person, you don't divide.
Yep, small intestine would just go to 1 person, and small intestine transplant is very rare. We actually don't. We can recover small intestine here in Iowa, but I think there's only 3 states in the United States that actually do intestinal transplants. So it's pretty rare, and we usually only see intestinal transplants in kids. Usually we don't see it in adults. At least in my time, I've never seen an adult. I've always just seen it in a kid. And it's very, very rare. I mean, in the 4 years I've worked there, I don't know of the last time we recovered an intestine. So it's a pretty rare situation, and I think it's just a very hard organ to recover. But it is a possibility that it can be recovered. Good question. Why is the stomach used? Oof, that I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, we get that. We get, there's a lot of organs that probably, we get asked, why isn't this organ or that organ? But that I'm not sure. Yeah.
And you said when they have on the ones that were imminent, and they have the declared brain dead, that's their time of death, correct?
The brain death,
But
yes.
then they are on the ventilator and life support for sometimes 2 days.
Correct.
Do you allow
Gosh, that's hard for the families, isn't it?
It is hard for the families, and there are some families that make the choice not to move forward because of that. But a lot of families choose to move forward because they know the positive outcome it's providing their family. So it's a 50-50, and we get it either way. We understand, because if they've already spent however much time in the hospital, whether it's 1 day or it's 4 days, it's 48 hours. We usually say up to 48 hours. Sometimes it can happen quickly, sometimes it can't. It just depends on, again, how many organs need to be placed, how healthy their organs are, if there's someone willing to take it right away. Maybe we have a hepatitis C donor where we have to go down the list quite a ways before we can find somebody, so sometimes that process is longer. So we sit and talk with the families, and we keep in communication with them the whole entire time, and let them know. So yeah, it can be a very difficult thing, and we don't blame the families in that situation for not.
Generous gift.
It's a very generous gift, and I will tell you, families that have chose not to move forward in that situation, a lot of them have come back later and said, I wish we would have just done it. Because the families that have done it has provided them so much peace. No, it does not replace their loved one, but at least, my loved one was able to help somebody else when I couldn't have them anymore, sort of thing. But yeah, we run into that all the time. Well, what do you mean I have to wait that much longer? But we have to, because we cannot legally move forward until the family has said yes and signed paperwork. I mean, that's a legal standpoint. We can't start placing anything ahead of time. Because if we do, because once something's placed, that transplant recipient has to be notified, because they have to get in the hospital and we have to coordinate. When we're making recovery, they're also in the OR being prepped, because they're open and ready for that organ when that organ gets there. So there's more than just placing the organ. They've got to organize it all.
Nationwide, you might have to fly that organ
Out to New York, out to DC, out to California. Correct. And we'll have to fly those surgeons in to get their organ. So if there's a recipient out in New York, right, that transplant surgeon is going to fly into the University of Iowa to get that organ and bring that back. Correct.
They need to be in-house.
Yep. So that's, if you think about it, 40 hours is a pretty quick turnaround for everything that we have to do.
Especially if it's multiple, I think.
Especially if it's multiple. But yes, for the families, 48 hours is terrible.
Yeah.
But we offer support to them that whole entire time. We put them up, we give them care packages. They get quilts, we do hand embossings with them. If they have children, we have family support. So it's not like we're just leaving them there. We'll give them as much support. We have someone with them 24 hours around the clock. So, but yeah, it's a lot. It's a big decision. And I will always say this, I'm obviously very supportive of donation, but until I'm in a situation with my child or my sister or my mom, I don't know what our response is going to be. You don't know. Until you're in that situation, you don't know what decision you're going to make. So it's not necessarily right or wrong. It's what's best for you at the time and your family. So good questions. So this is a quote to kind of just take and kind of let it set in a little bit, because this was a direct quote from this gal who lost her 2-year-old son. And I'll let you read her story. So this is Janelle. She's telling you about her son Caleb, and it was right when I started Iowa Donor Network, almost 4 years ago now. It was right before Christmas. His birthday was right before Christmas, actually. So he was 2 years old at the time. He went in for a tonsillectomy. Okay, sent him home the same day. Went home, went down for a nap, woke up, coughed up a little bit of blood. So they brought him back in the ER, and things progressively just got worse from there. I wouldn't say he passed away from the tonsillectomy itself. There was a lot of complications due to mistreatment, I should say. There wasn't the right treatment given when he came into the ER. He was sent from one hospital to another and then finally down to the university. So he was actually at 3 different hospitals. By the time he got to the university, he had lost too much oxygen to his blood or to his brain. And at this point, they pretty much told them that there's no chance of survival at this point. So here we are right before Christmas, which no time makes it good, but then we're right before Christmas, you know, it was just awful. He was like 2 or 3 days away from his 3rd birthday. And so his mom said, I'm not going to be able to give my son gifts on his birthday, so if you can make one deal with me, if we can donate on his birthday, that's the gift I want, and that's the gift I want for him. Now, I can't say as a parent I could do that, but that's what she wanted, and we were able to fulfill that wish for her. So Caleb did donate a little bit after midnight on his 3rd birthday, and I believe donated 5 organs and multiple tissues. But that quote that I just shared before, that comes directly from her, and that's how she looks at organ donation. It was able to offer her some bright light in the worst time in her life. You know, so we just like to share that because does she still struggle? Absolutely. Does she still miss her loved one? Absolutely. Caleb was her 6th child, the youngest child. Since then, she's had 1 more and had a little girl and actually named her after Caleb's fake friend that he always talked to, which was a little girl. So it's kind of ironic how that went out. But wonderful family, but again, it's just someone like you and I that day to day went to a daily procedure that you see a lot of kids, and that's the result. So it just goes to show that we don't always know what's going to happen when we go into things. And it's just something to be proactive about thinking, because you just don't know. So now after circulatory death, so someone passed away here at the hospital, time of death is pronounced. Now what do we do? This is where, again, you'd call in the death. Organs can't be donated, but tissues and eyes is still an option at this point. So referring after a death, obviously every single death is referred, regardless of age, medical history. Even if they verbalize to you, I don't want donation, or they have a documented donation decision in front of you, you still have to call that into us, okay? Now, if they verbalize to you, I don't want donation, or there's a notarized document saying they don't want donation, you tell us that. If they've just verbalized they don't want donation, but they are a registered donor, because of the CMS regulations, we still have to call the family and offer them because they gave their legal consent prior to death. Now, in a situation, if they're not registered and there is a documented donation decision or they verbalized it, chances of us calling family, we probably won't. But if they are a registered donor, we do have to move forward and contact them. So a little bit about the referral call. As many of you guys are aware, we're going to ask you multiple questions at the referral call. The more information you give us up front, the better, like I said, because then we're able to kind of process of elimination,